Pokemon Black and White 2 are some of the best Pokemon games out there. Along with this, many people believe the Poison type is pretty cool, so I'm gonna combine these two facts and see if I can beat Pokemon Black 2 using only Poison types. Just to make this run even more difficult though, I'm also gonna be adding on the hardcore Nuzlocke rules that we all know and love and that are on screen now. With all that being said, I'm ready to get into the game, so I start out by naming myself Zwiggo and I head on to get my starter. Because I've played this game about a billion times, I know exactly where Bianca is, but the first time I tried to go through this, gosh, I could not find her. That being said, Bianca has a starter for me, and the starter I pick in this run is going to be a Venipede. I get this Venipede because I don't actually get a poison type until after the first gym, so after getting it, I look at its nature, and it's got special attack down and special defense up, which is actually really solid nature. I give her the nickname Envy, then I move on to my rival battle, in which I absolutely destroy this man. Seriously, it was bad. I have super effective rollout this early in the game. Oh, it's going to be such a sweep. After that rival battle, I say bye-bye to my mom, she says bon voyage, and I now meet up with Bianca, who wants to teach me how to catch a Pokemon. While Bianca is teaching me in this insanely long cutscene, I figure I might as well talk about a completely free-to-play hit mobile RPG that is Raid Shadow Legends. Raid has over 80 million players worldwide, which is no surprise as it has amazing console and PC-like graphics on mobile devices. It has over 650 completely unique champions you can collect from different factions, and there are billions of ways to customize these champions. Right now, my top 3 favorite champions are Venus, Cupidus, and Karato. Out of the 3, I think I like Cupidus the most, mainly because of his name, but I also love his color scheme as well. He reminds me a lot of Valentine's Day, and even in the world of Raid Shadow Legends, love is in the air. New players can enjoy a special Valentine's Day themed event in the Raid Love Quest. All you need to do to enjoy this event is download Raid Shadow Legends using the links I have below and copy and paste your player ID into raidlovequest.plarium.com. This event is lasting from now until March 14th, and if you end up playing one of Raid's special Valentine's Day themed minigames, then you have the chance of winning some awesome prizes. You could win some Valentine's Day themed champions and even Amazon gift cards worth up to $1,000. If you're currently a Raid player, don't worry, you can still go to that exact same link and get a special Valentine's Day gift from Raid to you. Raid has seriously got an endless stream of content with new champions and updates coming every single month. You can play Raid casually and take on tons of awesome bosses, or you can play to become the best. Either way, if you're a new player and haven't started playing yet, then click the link down in my description or scan the QR code on screen to download Raid. You'll be able to get unique bonuses worth up to $35. We're talking a free epic champion Jotun, 100k silver, 50 gems, and 2 epic skill tomes. Seriously guys, Raid is an amazing game and you should absolutely download it. Thanks to Raid for sponsoring this video, and finally, Bianca is done catching that Purrloin. Continuing on into the game, I find Alder, then I move all the way to Velocity Ranch. In this ranch, I've got another easy rival battle, and after passing by that, I've got to find myself a Herdier. This Herdier was taken by Team Plasma, and after successfully freeing him, I'm able to say bye-bye to the dogs and head towards the first gym. As I'm heading over there, Alder jumps off this cliff and gives me a handful of orange berries that I stick on Venipede before going in to fight Charon. Charon starts with a Patrat as I bring out Venipede. On the first turn, I go for a rollout but miss already as Patrat decides to go for a workup. On the next turn, I successfully hit a rollout which does about a 4th as Patrat then sets up a second workup. I'm now locked into rollout, so after hitting another one, Patrat gets brought down into the yellow as he hits me with a tackle that brings me down to 19 HP. On the following turn, I hit a 3rd rollout in a row and it finishes off Patrat and leads into the final Pokemon Lillipup. This Lillipup gets rocked as I hit another rollout and this time it's just one-shots. That right there wins me my first gym badge and leads me on to Verbank City. This city not only has some really solid music, but it also has an encounter for me down in the Verbank complex, and that's Coughing. After catching him, I give him the nickname Tranquil because just look at this guy, and I find that his nature is attack up and defense down, which is not really that great. Now I get to witness Roxy blow an absolute fuse and say a little bit too many no-no words for my liking as I then go challenge her in my second gym battle. Roxy leads the battle with Coughing as I lead with a Coughing of my own. With Tranquil, I start by going for an Assurance that does literally no damage as I get hit by an Assurance as well. On the next turn, I decide to go for a Sludge and it does about a 4th, bringing Coughing almost down to half as I then get hit by another Assurance. This Assurance brings me down to 34s, and the following turn I go for another Sludge and it gets a critical hit finishing off Coughing. With that, Roxy's onto her final Pokemon Whirlipede, and on the first turn in, she actually outspeeds me and is able to go for a Venoshock, bringing me down to 25. On that same turn, I went for a Sludge that did basically no damage, so eventually I ended up just switching out to Venipede. With my Venipede in, I have that lethal rollout, so I just spam that until eventually Whirlipede goes down and I win my second badge. Next up is the most boring sequence in all of Pokemon, Pokestar Studios. goes. This area of the game is so boring that even the CPUs in the audience are sleeping through the movie, and just ouch. Once I make it out of there, I find myself back in Burbank where there's a lot of Team Plasma waiting for me. I end up dwindling them down until eventually I chase them back to Castelia City. In Castelia, I go down into the sewers and I'm actually able to get an encounter here, and it's a Zubat. I catch the Zubat and I give him the nickname Angry just because I feel like having no eyes would make you a little bit cranky. That being said, he's got a serious nature, which means all his stats are neutral, and now I can finally challenge Team Plasma again. They get dealt with pretty simply by Tranquil. Then we meet Chloris, who's got this like solar system orbiting his head. It's kind of weird. I'm now able to evolve 2 of my Pokemon prior to starting my 3rd gym battle. First, I evolve Zubat all the way up to a Crobat, and I also evolve Venipede into Whirlipede. That being said, I start my battle with Berg, and he leads with Swadaloon as I lead with Angry. Angry's got Wing Attack, so Swadaloon gets O-Code, and the next Pokemon to come out is Dwebble. I didn't really think Dwebble would be that big of an issue, so I elected to stay in and go for a handful of Wing Attacks that eventually take him down, and this leads into the final Pokemon, Leavanny. Leavanny gets swept away by a 4-time super effective Wing Attack, and that earns me my 3rd badge. Next up, it's time to go to the desert and meet up with Chloris again. This time, he actually battles me, and in this battle, he has a lot of good Pokemon, mainly because they're Steel types, and I have a really hard time dealing with Steel types. Now, currently, he's only got 2 Pokemon, so this fight isn't too difficult, but later on in the game, this will definitely be a problem. Moving on, before I get into Nimbasa, I meet this guy who says a really stupid joke to me, and this other group of people that says subscribe, so maybe you should do that. That being said, going past Nimbasa City, I find myself in Lostlorn Forest, where I'm able to get another encounter, this one being Roselia. Roselia is a really solid Pokemon, and after catching her, I give her the nickname Gloom. Like my Crobat, Gloom has a serious nature, and moving on past that area onto Route 6 leads to me finding another encounter, this one being a Trubbish. I don't really use Trubbish at all in this run, but I still end up catching it, and I give him the nickname Pride because he seems prideful to be trash. Now I evolve Whirlipede into a Scolipede, then move on fully into Nimbasa City, where I can start my journey towards the 4th gym. The first thing I do is find myself in this fake gym for absolutely no reason. I don't really know why they have you go in this, but the second thing I do is go on this really awkward Ferris wheel ride. After permanently dodging that lady, I'm able to go challenge Elisa for my 4th badge. She leads the battle with Emolga as I lead with Envy. Against Emolga, I start out by going for a Poison Tail, doing half and poisoning, as on that same turn she hits me with a Volt Switch that ends up moving her out into Zebstrika. With Zebstrika in, I decide to go for a Bug Bite to steal the Citrus Berry off of her, and she ends up hitting me with a Flame Charge that ends up raising her speed and doing a decent chunk of damage to me. A crit from Flame Charge probably kills me here, but I don't really know what Zebstrika is going to go for, so I decide to go for a Protect, and Zebstrika tries to hit me with a Quick Attack. Knowing that Zebstrika is going for Quick Attack, I decide to stay in, and I get hit by a critical hit Quick Attack, bringing me down to 23 HP as I then go for a Poison Tail. This Poison Tail brings Zebstrika down into the red and ends up poisoning her. Because I know the AI is going to heal here, I decide to stay in with Scolipede still and go for another Poison Tail. This Poison Tail does just enough to bring Zebstrika down into half with the poison, and now I've got to switch out. I move into Angry because I doubt that Zebstrika is going to go for a Volt Switch, and I was actually right about that, so the switch into Angry was really good as I end up finishing off Zebstrika with a return. With Zebstrika down, the next Pokemon to come out is Falafi, and for Falafi, I decide to switch out into Tranquil. Tranquil is really bulky, so after an entire selection of moves, Falafi ends up eventually going down, and this leads into the final Pokemon, Emolga. For Emolga, it's an easy switch into Gloom, and I'm able to slowly drain this thing's health away until eventually I win my 4th badge. With that badge, I could start towards Driftvale City, but on my way there, I meet up with my rival who's being swarmed by Team Plasma members, and I don't really care about this kid too much, so I just end up walking away. After he's finished getting Jump, I'm able to move past that area and fight the Heartbreaker Charles. He's got a Sigilif, which could have been really difficult for me to deal with, but it kind of just keeps rotating back and forth, so it ended up being a pretty easy fight. With that, it's time to start listening to the best Pokemon theme of all time, Driftvale City. In this city, I meet up with the old Team Plasma. They talk about the new Team Plasma a little bit, a lot of Team Plasma in this video, but eventually moving past them, I'm able to get another encounter on the next route, and that's Fungus. After catching Fungus, I give him the nickname Relief, then I move on further onto this route where this little girl gives me a shiny stone. I absolutely appreciate this, as I'm able to immediately evolve my Roselia all the way into Roserade. This Roserade will help me out a ton in my next gym battle against the ground type gym leader Clay. He starts the fight by bringing out his Croc as I end up leading with Gloomy. Gloomy is really fast and really strong, so a single Giga Drain is enough to finish off Croc and lead into the next Pokemon, Sandslash. This Sandslash suffers the same fate as the previous Pokemon and gets one-shot one-shotted by a Giga Drain. With that, Clay's on to his final Pokemon, Excadrill. Now, Excadrill is a really powerful Pokemon, and I know I cannot one-shot it with a Giga Drain, so the first thing I do is elect to go for a Leech Seed. I then get hit by a Slash that brings me down to 39 HP, as the Leech Seed ends up bringing me back up to 54. On the next turn, I go for a Giga Drain that heals me back up to full, as Excadrill hits me with a second Slash that brings me down to 42. With that, one final Giga Drain finishes off Excadrill and wins me a pretty tough 5th badge. Leaving Dravale City leads me towards this Pokemon tournament. This tournament has me go up against a couple of people, and I end up defeating all of them, win the tournament, and once I leave there, I see Team Plasma run off towards their ship. I end up chasing them on board and get kicked off the ship after defeating every single one of them. The next thing to do after that pretty rude encounter is go to Chargestone Cave. Unfortunately, I'm not able to get a poison type here, but I am able to meet the Nugget Man, so I guess everything balances out. After getting a couple of nuggets, I'm able to go into Mistralton City, where I meet up with Professor Junifer. After talking with her for a little bit, I move on to Route 6 or 7 maybe, I'm not really sure, and I end up catching a Pokemon here. The Pokemon I catch is a Survivor, and after catching Survivor, I give him the nickname Mad. I just feel like it fit. I then go to retrieve him from the box so I can use him in this upcoming gym battle. This one's against Skyla, and before getting in my fight with her, I end up evolving my Trubbish into Garbodor, and I evolve my Coughing into Weezing. With that being said, Skyla leads the battle with Swoobat as I decide to lead with Survivor. On the first turn, Swoobat outspeeds me and hits me with a Heart Stamp, getting a ton of damage off and actually flinching me. This is really bad, as on the next turn, I'm brought down to 10 HP by another Heart Stamp, and thankfully I'm able to get off a Night Slash that brings Swoobat down to about a third remaining. Now at this point, I've got an option to switch, but I actually don't want to tank a Heart Stamp for any of my other Pokemon, so I decide to actually stay in and take a death. Survivor will not be forgotten, as he gives me a free switch into my Crobat, so I can finish off Swoobat with a Bite. With Swoobat down, the next Pokemon to come out is Swanna, and against Swanna, I start out by going for a return that does about a third, as I then get hit by an Air Slash, which does about a fourth to me, brings me down to 87. On the next turn, another return allows Swanna to heal up a little bit with a Citrus Berry, then she decides to go for a Roost. This Roost brings her up to essentially full, so what I do is decide to go for a Confuse Ray. With Swanna confused, she hits herself, and then I hit her with another return that brings her down to half. She then, for the second time in a row, hits herself with confusion, and one more return is able to finish her off. Last out is the extra bulky Skarmory, so for this, I've got to decide to switch in between a ton of different Pokemon until eventually this thing goes down, and I win my 6th badge. Next up, me and Skyla head on her private jet all the way to Reversal Mountain. Next to the mountain, I find and catch myself a Skorupi that I nicknamed Vengeful. I immediately evolve it into Drapion, then check out the nature, and its defense up and special attack down, which is really solid. It also has the ability Battle Armor, which means I can't get crit, which is great. That being said, the next step in my journey is to leave this mountain and go into Andella Town so I can challenge my rival again. This fight gets completed pretty easily, but I can already tell it might be a little bit issue later on in the game. Walking alongside my rival leads me onto some more Team Plasma, and after defeating Zinzalin and his awful ice types, I'm able to head towards Opelucid City. On my way there, I get greeted by this Virizion who jumps off a cliff for some reason. I just walk past this thing and head into Opelucid so I can get my next encounter. This one's a muck that I catch in an Ultra Ball and give the nickname Nauseated to, just because I feel like this is what throw up looks like. That being said, looking at the nature, I am Adamant, which is insanely good, as Muck has basically no special attack anyways. Before challenging Drayden for my 7th badge, I decide to go back to the Pokemon tournament area and meet up with a move relearner so I can get a ton of new moves that my Pokemon didn't previously have access to. After fully fixing up my team, I'm able to go fight Drayden for my 7th badge, and he leads the battle with Dredagon as I lead with Scolipede. What I did in the move relearner is essentially turn my Scolipede into a setup mastermind. On the first 2 turns of this fight, I set up a Sword Stance and an Agility while taking minimal damage in the process. Then after that, I decided to use Baton Pass so I can move into Vengeful and start spamming Ice Fang. On the switch in, Vengeful got hit by a Crunch, which did really minimal damage, and on the next turn, I went for an Ice Fang assuming it would kill, but it only brings Dredagon down to about a third remaining. On the next turn, I get nailed by a Revenge that brings me down to 77, and at this point, I assume Dredagon's gonna heal, so I set up a Hone Claws, and he actually doesn't. This could have been really bad for me, as if I got crit by a Revenge, I probably would have died, but he didn't go for a Revenge, and he decided to go for a Slash that brought me down to 55. Finally, I get to finish off Dredagon with another Ice Fang, and the next Pokemon to come out is Flygon. Flygon gets frozen over by a 4-time super effective Ice Fang, and this leads into the final Pokemon, Haxorus. Now at +3 here, you'd assume that I'd just kill anything in my way, but I actually don't, and I bring Haxorus down to 1 HP with an Ice Fang. He then heals up a little bit with a citrus berry, and thankfully he ended up getting flinched by that Ice Fang, so I don't have to worry. One more Ice Fang later, and I've got badge number 7. After getting the badge, I walk outside and get to see Opaloosa get iced by Team Plasma. After fighting everyone and their mother, I end up getting these DNA splicers stolen from me, and I've then got to go into Humalau City where the next gym is. It's also where this maniac Marlin is located, and he literally jumps out of this water like 10 feet, just straight out of the water. He's insane. Unfortunately, knowing that that's the man I've got to fight in my next gym battle, I decided to chill out in this faceboard for way too long, and then I finally gain up the courage to go fight him for my final badge. He leads the fight with Caracosta, as I lead with Gloomy. On the first turn, I set up a Leech Seed to break the Sturdy, as I get hit by a Crunch, and it brings me down to about half, as I then heal up a little bit with that Leech Seed. On the next turn, Caracosta gets drained by a 4-time super effective Grass move, and this leads into the next Pokemon, Wailord. Shockingly enough, even with Wailord's insane HP stat, I still end up one-shotting with Giga Drain, and that brings in the final Pokemon, Jellicent. Jellicent's a little bit annoying to deal with, especially since it's got an Omni Boost, but it didn't really matter that much in the end, as I'm eventually able to take it down and win my final badge. After receiving that from Marlin, he jumps back into the water, and I head up to Colress, and he gives me this special little device that I use on this Crustle to get him out of the way so I can fight more Team Plasma. As usual, they're more of a chore than anything else, and after defeating them, they fly off towards the giant chasm where I'm gonna have one of my hardest fights of this run. This one's against Colress, and his team of Steel types could actually be pretty scary. In the end, the battle proved a little bit more easier than expected, as I didn't lose a single Pokemon, but in the middle of the fight, this Klinklang started to set up a ton of shift gears, and I was really scared, but it was all alright. With him down, the next two big fights are against Black Kyurem and Getsis. Black Kyurem is really powerful and nearly took out 2 of my Pokemon, but in the end, I survived and moved on to Getsis. Now this battle was really easy. I ended up setting up with Scolipede right in the beginning of the fight, so I didn't really have to worry about anything else past that. With that, Team Plasma disbands, and I'm off towards the last part of this game, which is Victory Road. After traveling through there for a little while, I end up meeting up with my rival once again, and we have our final fight. He leads the battle with Unfezant, as I lead with Scolipede. Starting the battle off, I decided to set up a Swords Dance, as Unfezant tried to hit me with a Swagger, but ended up missing. On the following turn, I set up a second Swords Dance, as Unfezant hits me with a Swagger, but I have a Person Berry, so I don't actually get confused. Now that I'm at +6 attack, you know the deal. This entire team gets sweeped, and I'm off towards the Pokemon League. Now before starting my Elite Four fight, I decided to change up my team a little bit, and I added Relief instead of my Garbodor because he kinda just sucks. After evolving Relief into Amoonguss, I'm ready to start my Elite Four journey with Caitlyn. She leads with Musharna, as I lead with Scolipede, and the first thing I do with this thing is set up a ton. I know Musharna loves to set up Yawn, so I have a Chesto Berry on me so I can set up as much as possible. This setup is 3 turns long, and after doing that, I'm able to bat and pass out into my Drapion. Now unfortunately, my Drapion gets hit by a Yawn on the switch in, but it doesn't really matter too much, as I'm able to one-shot Musharna with a single Crunch. On the next turn, Reniculus comes in and decides to go for a Focus Blast as I'm asleep, but it doesn't hit because it's Focus Blast. On the next turn, I wake up and finish off Reniculus with a one-shot, as that leads into the third Pokemon, Sigilif. Sigilif also gets bodied by a Crunch, and this brings out the final Pokemon, Gothitelle. This thing is promptly obliterated, and that wins me my fight against Caitlyn. For this next one, I decide to go up against Grimsley, and he starts out with a Liepard, as I lead with Envy. On the first turn, I get hit by a Fake Out, flinching me, and on the next, I set up a Swords Dance before getting hit by an Aerial Ace that brings me down to 74. Thankfully, I'm faster than this thing, so I'm able to go for a Bat and Pass and switch out into Angry, my Crobat. Crobat has Acrobatics, which absolutely obliterates Liepard and the upcoming Scrafty. This brings out the third Pokemon, Crocodile, who has Intimidate, which lowers my attack by 1 stage. Even with this, I figured I would still kill, so I decided to go for an X-Scissor, and it actually brings Crocodile to about 1 HP remaining. On that same turn, I got dinked by a Crunch that brought me down to 41 HP, but 2 turns later, Crocodile goes down as Grimsley decides to heal. This whole series of events brings out the final Pokemon, Bisharp, and for this, I absolutely cannot stay in. I decide now to switch into my Muck and go for a 4-time super effective Brick Break that takes down the Bisharp. This right here allows me to go into my next fight against Marshall. Marshall leads with Throw, as again, I lead with Scolipede. With Scolipede, the first thing I do is set up an Agility, because I know Throw has a lot of moves that lower my speed. On that same turn, I got hit by a Rock Tomb that brought me down to 103, and on the next turn, I set up a Swords Dance. I then again get hit by another Rock Tomb that brings me down to 51 remaining, and now it's time to switch out with a Bat and Pass into my Crobat. Unfortunately, on the switch in, I get hit by a Rock Throw, which lowers my speed to -1. Even with that though, my Crobat is still super fast, so I get to go for a free Acrobatics, which finishes off Throw and leads into the next Pokemon, Conkeldurr. Conkeldurr is really slow, so that's another one-shot with Acrobatics. Now Sock comes in, and I actually can't one-shot this thing. It's got Sturdy, so I'm kind of forced to switch out, so I move into Relief. Unfortunately enough for Sock, it can't do much damage to me. Amoonguss is just too bulky for this thing, thing, and after a couple of Giga Drains, I'm basically at full HP and Sock is down. Lastly is the final Pokemon Mienshao. Mienshao gets taken down by a combination of Gloomy and Relief, and with that, I'm on to my final Elite Four member, Chantal. Chantal leads the battle with Cofagrigus as I lead with Gloomy. I start out by going for a Giga Drain, doing about half as Cofagrigus then misses a Will-O-Wisp. One turn later, Cofagrigus goes down to another Giga Drain as that leads into the next Pokemon, Chandelure. I know pretty much for a fact that none of my Pokemon will survive a Fire Blast from this thing, so I kinda just decide to sack Gloomy here. Gloomy gets absolutely incinerated, but does give me a free switch into Vengeful. With Vengeful in, I can take down Chandelure with a Crunch and bring out the next Pokemon, Golurk. I know Golurk's gonna go for an Earthquake, so I decide to switch out into my Crobat. Then after doing that, I make a switch into Relief because Crobat doesn't have any moves to deal with this. Eventually with Relief, I'm able to get off a Giga Drain and it does a decent bit of damage, but I'm actually really low. Thankfully, with the leftovers I have on Relief, I heal up just enough to the point where I feel comfortable going for another Giga Drain, and I actually survive on 7 HP. This allows me to get off a second Drain and finish off the Golurk's remaining HP, leading into the final Pokemon, Drifbloom. Drifbloom's a pretty simple open and shut case. I'm able to just switch into Vengeful and go for a couple of crunches, finishing her off and winning myself my final Elite Four battle. Now with the rest of the run behind us, I fix up my team a little bit before going into my final fight with Iris. She leads the battle with Hydreigon as I lead with Scolipede. I know I outspeed Hydreigon, and with the Bug Gem, I know I probably kill as well, so I decided to go for an X-Scissor, and thankfully I was right about that. Hydreigon goes down and leads into the next Pokemon, Druddigon. Before attacking Druddigon, I decide to set up a Swords Dance as Druddigon then hits me with a Rock Slide that brings me down really low. It took me all the way down to 17 HP, but I'm pretty confident I kill with an X-Scissor here, so I decide to go for it, and I'm actually right. With Druddigon taken down, Archeops gets sent in, so I go for a Baton Pass as I don't really have any purpose for Scolipede anymore. I made the decision to switch into Angry as he's probably my only Pokemon that can outspeed this Archeops, and on the switch in, he gets nailed by an Acrobatics and gets brought down to 43. On the next turn, I have a +2 gem boosted Acrobatics and nothing is stopping that, so Archeops gets bodied. I'm extremely happy about that as it killed even as it was not very effective. That being said, with Archeops down, the next Pokemon to come in is Lapras. Lapras is built like an absolute unit, so when I go for an Acrobatics at +2, it doesn't kill and it brings her to a sliver remaining. As you can imagine, that's the end of my Crobat and it allows me to bring in Nauseated. On the first turn Nauseated's in, Lapras gets healed up by a full restore and I went for a Brick Break that did nearly half. On the next turn, I unfortunately get put to sleep by a Sing, and on the following turn, I'm still staying asleep as I get hit by a Surf. I'm good to go though in the next turn as I wake up and hit a Brick Break that brings Lapras down to 1 HP yet again. On the following turn, one more Brick Break does the trick and finishes off Lapras as I have 54 health remaining going into Aggron. A Brick Break is 4 times super effective against Aggron, but it actually doesn't kill and only brings her down to like a third remaining. That right there is the end of Nauseated though, as I get hit by a Double Edge and she goes down, leading into my next Pokemon, Relief. Relief, much like Lapras, is also built like a unit, so when I get hit by a Double Edge, it doesn't even do half as I'm then able to finish off Aggron's remaining HP with a Giga Drain. This all leads me on to Iris's final Pokemon, the dreaded Haxorus. On the first turn, I figured Haxorus was probably going to try to go for a Dragon Dance, and I was right about that, so I decided to go for a Toxic. On the following turn, Haxorus sets up a second Dragon Dance, so it's probably going to one-shot the rest of my team now. That being said, with Relief, I went for a Venoshock, and it brought Haxorus down to about a third remaining. The Toxic damage ended up bringing Haxorus even lower, and on the next turn, my Amoonguss gets absolutely destroyed by an Earthquake. With that, I switch into Vengeful, and Iris doesn't have any full restores, so she can't actually heal her Pokemon, so I just kind of win through toxic damage here. Haxorus is able to drill Vengeful with an Earthquake and take her down, but it doesn't really matter. As I get the last laugh, Haxorus goes down to toxic, and I win my final battle of this run. With that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, if you could leave a like and subscribe, that'd be really appreciated, and a big thanks to Raid for sponsoring this one. That right there was my attempt at a Pokemon Black 2 Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Poison types.